Once upon a time, in a small village surrounded by rolling hills and bubbling streams, there lived a young woman named Amara. Amara was the pride of her family. She was beautiful, with eyes that sparkled like the morning sun and a smile that could melt even the hardest hearts. But Amara wasn't just beautiful. She was smart, kind, and had a heart as pure as gold. Everyone in the village knew Amara, and many young men admired her from afar. But her parents, Mama and Chike and Papa Ease, were very protective. They had big dreams for their daughter. Amara, Mama and Chike would often say, "You will marry someone who will make this family proud. Someone with good character and respect for tradition." Amara would smile and nod, but deep down, she wondered if her parents' expectations might be too high. She wanted love, real love, not just someone who ticked all the boxes on her parents' list. One day, while Amara was returning from the stream with her water pot balanced perfectly on her head, she saw something unusual. A young man, dressed in city clothes, stood by the village well, looking lost and confused. He wasn't like anyone she had seen before. His name was Chike. Chike was tall and handsome, with a voice that sounded like music. He had come to the village to visit his uncle, but it seemed like he had taken a wrong turn. Amara couldn't help but giggle as she watched him struggle to understand directions from the village children, who were teasing him for being a city boy. "Excuse me," Chike said when he noticed Amara. "Can you help me find Chief Okeke's compound?" Amara laughed softly. "You're standing in front of it." Chike looked embarrassed, but relieved. "Ah, thank you. I thought I was going in circles." "Don't worry," Amara replied, her voice warm. "You're not the first person to get lost here." From that moment, something sparked between them. Over the following weeks, Chike and Amara saw each other often. He would visit the stream when he knew she would be there, and they would talk about everything: her dreams of starting a school for village children and his ambitions to grow his business in the city. Chike wasn't like the village boys. He respected Amara's thoughts and listened to her as if every word she said was a precious jewel. Amara began to see a future with him, one that was filled with laughter, love, and adventure. But the closer they grew, the more Amara worried about what her parents would think. Chike wasn't from the village, and he didn't follow all the traditional ways. Mom and Chike had always warned her about men who don't understand where we come from. One sunny afternoon, as the sound of birds filled the air, Chike finally told Amara how he felt. "Amara," he began, his voice steady but soft, "I know I'm not from here, and I may not know all your customs. But I know one thing. I want to spend my life with you. Will you give me the chance to meet your family?" Amara's heart raced. She looked at him, her mind torn between love and fear. "Chike," she said slowly, "I want that too. But my family, they're not easy to please." Chike smiled, his confidence unshaken. "Let me worry about that. For you, I'll do anything." Amara smiled back, but deep down, she knew the journey ahead would not be easy. Her family valued tradition above all else, and Chike was about to face the biggest test of his life. Amara couldn't stop thinking about Chike. That night, as she sat on the wooden bench outside her family's compound, she stared at the moon and sighed deeply. The cool evening breeze kissed her face, but her heart was restless. "Chike wants to meet my family," she whispered to herself, shaking her head slowly. "But how will Mom and Chike and Papa Ease even agree to listen to him? He's not from our village. He doesn't know our ways." Amara loved her parents and didn't want to disappoint them, but she couldn't deny her feelings for Chike. He made her happy in a way no one else ever had. But her parents were strict, and she knew they had their own plans for her future. Early the next morning, Amara decided to talk to her closest friends. She needed advice. If anyone could help her clear her head, it was Nkem and Ifeoma, the two friends who had been by her side since they were children. They met under the big mango tree near the stream, where they often gathered to chat and laugh. Amara sat on the smooth rock while Nkem and Ifeoma squatted beside her, peeling oranges. "Amara, your face is looking like you swallowed bitter leaf soup this morning," Nkem teased, her eyes twinkling. "What is it?" Amara smiled faintly, but didn't laugh. She twisted the edge of her wrapper and said, "It's Chike. He wants to meet my family." Ifeoma's eyes widened. "Chike? The city boy? Ah, that's serious. Oh. Are you ready for that? That's the problem, Amara said, her voice heavy. I like him. I like him very much. But my parents, you know how they are. They'll start asking questions. Where is he from? Who are his people? Does he follow our customs? I'm afraid they will say no. And Kim nodded thoughtfully. Mama and Ketchy and Papa ease. They don't joke with tradition. But Amara, are you sure this Chike is serious about you? Amara looked up sharply. Yes, he is. He treats me like a queen. He listens to me, respects me. I feel happy with him. Ifeoma leaned closer. But Amara, will happiness be enough? If your parents reject him, what will you do? Will you still stand by him? Amara sighed again, the weight of their questions pressing on her. She looked at the water flowing gently in the stream, wishing her thoughts could flow away just as easily. I don't know, she admitted quietly. I'm scared. What if I lose him? But what if I lose my family too? Kim and Ifeoma exchanged glances. They wanted to help, but they didn't have all the answers. You need to think well, Amara, Kim said finally. This is not small matter. You have to follow your heart, but also be ready for whatever comes with it. Amara nodded, though her heart still felt heavy. She needed more time to figure things out. Would her family ever accept Chike? Or would her love for him bring trouble she wasn't ready for? The next morning, Amara couldn't think straight. Her mind was running like a market on a busy day. She thought about Chike and how much she liked him, but she also worried about what her parents would say. As she helped Mama and Ketchy pound yam in the backyard, her mother suddenly spoke, her tone serious. Amara, you know you're not getting any younger. Amara froze, her hand gripping the pestle tightly. Mama, why are you saying this now? She asked carefully. Mama and Ketchy adjusted her wrapper and gave her daughter a sharp look. It's because I want the best for you, my dear. You're our first daughter, and it's time you settle down. Your father and I have been talking. There's a suitor who has shown interest in you. He is a good man from a respected family. He will be coming next week to ask for your hand in marriage. Amara felt her chest tighten. She tried to hide her shock, but the pestle slipped from her hand and hit the side of the mortar with a loud thud. Ah, be careful, Amara, her mother scolded. What is wrong with you? Sorry, Mama, Amara mumbled, quickly picking up the pestle. But her thoughts were spinning. A suitor? Coming next week? How would she tell her parents about Chike now? All through the day, Amara felt like she was carrying a heavy load on her head. She didn't know what to do. Could she tell her parents about Chike? Would they even listen? Or should she meet this suitor and hope for the best? By evening, Amara couldn't take it anymore. She needed fresh air. She went to the mango tree near the stream, their usual meeting spot, hoping to clear her head. But the moment she sat on the smooth rock, Chike appeared, his tall figure walking towards her with his usual confident stride. Amara, he called, his voice full of warmth, but his smile faded when he saw her face. What is wrong? You're looking like someone who lost her favorite goat. Amara forced a smile and shook her head. Nothing is wrong, Chike. I'm fine. Chike raised an eyebrow, clearly not convinced. He sat beside her and studied her face. Are you sure? Because you don't look fine to me. Did something happen at home? Amara looked away, her fingers playing with the edge of her wrapper. I said I'm all right, Chike, she replied firmly, though her voice was quieter than usual. Chike nodded slowly, but didn't look satisfied. All right then, he said, his tone calm. But deep down, he knew she wasn't telling him the truth. Her eyes carried a sadness he couldn't ignore. Chike felt very sick. His once lively eyes were dull, and his strong voice had become weak. Amara's heart broke every time she saw him lying helplessly on the mat in his small house. He needed medicine, but Chike didn't have money, and neither did she. For 2 days, Amara couldn't sleep. She kept thinking of how to help him. She didn't want to ask her friends because she knew they would start asking questions. What if her father found out? He already didn't like the idea of city boys. Finally, she came up with a risky plan. She would sell some of her father's yam tubers from the barn and use the money to buy the drugs. Papa won't notice, she told herself. It's just a few yams, and I can't watch Chike suffer like this. The next morning, while her parents were busy in the compound, Amara went to the barn and carefully picked 3 of the biggest yams. She wrapped them in an old cloth and carried them to the market. Her heart was pounding the whole time. What if someone saw her? What if her father asked about the missing yams? But she pushed the thoughts aside. Chike needed her. At the market, she sold the yams quickly and used the money to buy the drugs. She was careful not to spend too much time in one place. By the time she returned home, her parents were still busy and no one suspected anything. That evening, as they sat in the compound, Papa Ease scratched his head and frowned. "This barn is looking empty somehow," he said. "I counted my yams last week, and I think some are missing." Mom and Ketchy looked up from peeling cassava. "Maybe it's rats," she said. "Those big rats can eat anything these days." Amara kept her head down, pretending to be focused on her weaving. Her hands were steady, but her heart was racing. She knew Papa wouldn't suspect her, but she had to be extra careful from now on. The next day, Amara went to Chike's house with the drugs. She made sure no one was following her. But just as she was about to enter his small house, she heard a voice behind her. "Amara!" She turned sharply and saw Ifeoma standing a few steps away. Her friend's face was full of surprise. "What are you doing here? Is this not Chike's house?" Amara's throat went dry. She looked around nervously, then pulled Ifeoma aside. "Please, Ifeoma," she whispered. "You cannot tell anyone you saw me here." Ifeoma raised an eyebrow. "Why are you hiding? What's going on?" Amara hesitated, but finally said, "Chike is very sick. I came to help him. Please, don't let anyone know. If my parents find out, it will cause big trouble." Ifeoma looked at her friend for a long moment. Finally, she nodded. "All right, Amara. I won't tell anyone. But you have to be careful. This is dangerous." "I will," Amara said, relief washing over her. "Thank you, Ifeoma. You're a true friend." The day Amara had been dreading finally came. Her father, Papa Ease, had invited her supposed suitor to the house. Early that morning, Amara noticed how everyone in the compound was busy preparing for the visit. Mama and Ketchy cooked large pots of soup, and her younger siblings ran around, cleaning the sitting room and setting chairs. Amara sat quietly in her room, her heart pounding. She didn't want to meet this man, but she couldn't avoid it either. By the afternoon, the suitor arrived with 2 elders from his family. He was an old man with a pot-belly, gray hair, and a face that looked like he had been frowning his whole life. Amara's father welcomed them warmly, shaking hands and laughing loudly as they sat in the sitting room. The discussion started with praises and pleasantries, as was customary. "Your daughter, Amara, is a beautiful and respectful girl," one of the elders said. "She will make a good wife for our brother here." Papa Ease nodded proudly. "Yes, Amara is a good girl. She will bring joy to any home." The suitor, who introduced himself as Chief Ineo, cleared his throat and said in a deep voice, "I've been looking for a wife with good upbringing, and I believe Amara is the perfect choice." Amara could hear everything from her room. She shook her head in disbelief. "Perfect choice? For who?" she muttered under her breath. She felt her stomach churn with anger and anxiety. After some time, her father called out, "Mama and Ketchy, bring Amara to the sitting room. Let her meet her husband-to-be." Mama and Ketchy entered Amara's room and gave her a firm look. "Amara, come out now. Don't embarrass your father." Reluctantly, Amara got up and followed her mother. When she entered the sitting room, all eyes turned to her. Her father smiled, gesturing toward the man seated in the middle. "Amara, meet Chief Ineo. He is here to ask for your hand in marriage." Amara's eyes widened as she saw the suitor. He was much older than she expected, easily her father's age or more. His face was wrinkled, and he wore a big gold chain that made him look even more ridiculous. She couldn't hide her reaction. Her face twisted in disgust before she could stop herself. The room fell silent as everyone noticed her expression. "What is it, Amara?" Papa Ease asked, frowning. "Why are you looking like that?" Amara took a deep breath and said, "Papa, I cannot marry this man." The elders gasped, and Chief Ineo's face turned red. "What do you mean you cannot marry me?" he asked, his voice rising. Amara folded her arms. "Chief, you are too old and ugly for me. How can I marry someone like you?" The room erupted. One of the elders exclaimed in Igbo, "Yo, Ikwakwaziro umuka akwe." Translation: "Oh, Children of today have no respect. Papa Ease's face burned with embarrassment as he tried to calm everyone. Please forgive her. She doesn't know what she's saying. But Amara wasn't done. She raised her voice and said, I'm sorry, Papa, but I already have someone I want to marry. He is younger, and I love him. I will bring him to meet you tomorrow. At her words, Chief Ineo stood up angrily. This is an insult. You should have told me before wasting my time, he said, storming out of the house with his elders following behind. The elders murmured their disapproval as they left. After they were gone, Papa Ease turned to Amara, his face stern. What is the meaning of this? Who is this man you are talking about? Amara knelt down quickly, trying to soften her father's anger. Papa, Mama, I'm sorry for embarrassing you, but I cannot marry Chief Ineo. I love someone else, and he loves me too. His name is Chike. Please, give me a chance to bring him to you. Mom and Ketchy shook her head in disbelief. Amara, what kind of trouble is this? Who is this Chike? Is he from a good family? Amara nodded eagerly. Yes, Mama. He's a good man. Just meet him, please. After a long silence, Papa Ease sighed heavily. All right, bring him tomorrow. But Amara, if he is not what we expect, you will face the consequences. Thank you, Papa, Amara said, relief flooding her heart. Later that evening, Amara rushed to Chike's house. He was sitting outside, still recovering from his illness, but his smile returned when he saw her. Amara, what brings you here in such a hurry? He asked. She sat down beside him, her eyes shining. Chike, I told my parents about you. They said you can come and meet them tomorrow. Chike's mouth fell open in surprise, but then he grinned. Are you serious? Amara, thank you. I will come. The next morning, Amara sat with her friends under the big mango tree near her house. She shared her plans with them, excitement lighting up her face. I'm taking Chike to my parents today. I already told them about him. Ifeoma's eyes widened. You told them? Amara, are you sure this is a good idea? Your father doesn't even like city people. Another friend, Ada, leaned forward. Does Chike even know our customs? You know Papa Ease will ask him all those tricky questions about tradition and family. Amara sighed and rubbed her palms together. I know it's risky, but I don't want to hide anymore. Chike is a good man. I just pray Papa and Mama accept him. The others exchanged worried looks, but didn't say more. Amara's confidence seemed unshaken, but deep down, she couldn't stop her heart from racing. What if her parents refused? What if they embarrassed Chike? By noon, Amara was ready. She and Chike walked together to her parents' house, joined by her friends, who wanted to show their support. Chike wore a simple shirt and trousers, his face calm but serious. Amara, dressed in her best wrapper and blouse, walked beside him, whispering words of encouragement. Just answer Papa's questions well. You'll be fine, she said. When they reached the house, Papa Ease and Mom and Ketchy were already waiting in the sitting room. Papa sat on his carved wooden chair, his face stern, while Mama sat beside him, her hands resting on her lap. Amara stepped forward, her voice steady. Papa, Mama, this is Chike, the man I told you about. He's the one I want to marry. Papa Ease looked up, his sharp eyes scanning Chike from head to toe. He didn't say anything at first, but his expression showed he was already forming an opinion. Mama and Ketchy exchanged a glance with her husband, her lips pressed together. Finally, Papa Ease spoke. So, you are the man my daughter wants to marry. Sit down. His voice was calm, but heavy with authority. Chike greeted them respectfully and sat down. Amara stood to the side, her heart pounding. Papa Ease leaned forward. Where are you from, young man? Which village? Chike answered confidently. Sir, I am from Enugu State, but I was born and raised in the city. At the mention of the city, both parents exclaimed in Igbo. Ah, NWA Abodo. Translation, a city boy? Mom and Ketchy shook her head. Amara, so this is the kind of person you brought to us? Papa Ease's frown deepened. City boys don't know anything about our traditions. How will he take care of you when he doesn't even understand how we do things here? Chike sat up straighter and said, Sir, I may be from the city, but I am willing to learn your customs and respect them. I love Amara and want to marry her with all due respect to your family. But Papa Ease wasn't impressed. He turned to Mama and Chike and spoke again in Igbo. Amara has brought shame to us. How can a child of this compound think of marrying someone who doesn't belong to our ways? Amara's voice broke into the tense silence. Papa, Chike is a good man. He has been kind and respectful to me. He will make a good husband. But her words seemed to fall on deaf ears. Papa Ease stood up abruptly. Amara, you cannot marry this man. He is not for you. Go and look for someone from the village who understands our ways. Chike looked stunned, but he stood up and bowed slightly. Sir, I understand your concerns, but I am serious about Amara. Please give me a chance to prove myself. Mama and Chike shook her head firmly. Young man, leave this house. You are not welcome here. Amara's heart sank as she watched her father motion toward the door. Leave now before I lose my temper, Papa Ease said. Chike turned to Amara, his face full of sorrow, and she could barely meet his eyes. She wanted to speak, to fight, but the weight of her parents' anger held her back. Chike walked out of the house quietly, leaving Amara standing there, tears welling in her eyes as her parents glared at her. Days passed, and Amara felt the weight of her father's rejection like a heavy stone on her chest. She missed Chike so much. Her thoughts were always with him, wondering how he was doing, why he hadn't come to see her, and if he was still thinking about her. But there was nothing she could do. Her father had locked her in the house, not letting her go anywhere, especially to Chike. Amara spent most of her days in her room, staring out the window, longing for a sign from Chike. Her heart ached, and she could barely eat or sleep. It felt like her world had collapsed, and she was stuck in a cage. One afternoon, as Amara was sitting on her bed, lost in her thoughts, she heard her father's heavy footsteps coming toward her room. The door flung open with a loud bang, and Papa Ease stormed in, his face twisted in anger. Amara, what have I been hearing? He shouted. You stole my crops to feed that city boy, that Chike. I've been looking for them everywhere. Amara jumped, shocked by her father's sudden outburst. She stood up slowly, her hands shaking. Papa, I didn't steal them to feed him. I sold some of them to buy medicine for him. He was sick. Papa Ease's face darkened even more. Sick? And you think that gives you the right to steal from me? Chike is a bad influence on you and this village. I don't want you to see him again. Amara felt her chest tighten. But, Papa, Chike is a good man. He needed help, and I couldn't just leave him to suffer. Papa Ease slammed his fist on the table. Enough! Chike is a bad man, and I will not have him ruining your future. I am going to his house, and I'll make sure he understands that he's not welcome here. Amara's heart raced with fear. No, Papa, please don't go. He's not a bad person. Don't hurt him. She rushed toward him, but he pushed her aside and stormed out of the room, his anger boiling over. Amara sank to her knees, tears streaming down her face. She begged, she pleaded, but her father didn't listen. He was too angry, too set in his ways. He locked the door behind him, leaving Amara locked inside, helpless and trapped. The next morning, Amara woke up feeling even worse. Her heart still hurt from the night before. She sat on her bed, staring at the wall, wondering what would happen next. She couldn't bear the thought of her father going to Chike's house, but there was nothing she could do to stop him. Just as she was lost in her thoughts, the sound of footsteps came from outside her window. It was Ifeoma, her friend. Amara's heart lifted a little, hoping Ifeoma had some good news. Ifeoma knocked on the door and came in. Her face was serious, and her eyes were filled with concern. Amara, I just heard something terrible. Ifeoma's voice shook. Chike was badly hurt. Some people said he was attacked. I don't know the full story, but it's bad. Amara's heart stopped. What? What happened to him? Her voice cracked, barely able to say the words. Ifeoma shook her head. I don't know the full details, but people are saying it was because of your father. They say your father went to his house. Amara, it's bad. Amara felt like the ground had been pulled from under her. No. My papa did this? Tears welled up in her eyes, but she couldn't cry anymore. Her heart was too full of fear and guilt to cry. What had her father done? Why did he have to hurt Chike? She had to know if Chike was okay. She couldn't just sit there while he suffered. But the door was locked, and she was trapped in her room once again. Amara's heart raced with fear as she snuck out of the house that night. She knew it was dangerous, but she couldn't just sit there. She had to find Chike. She ran through the village paths, her mind filled with worry. What had happened to him? Was he okay? Was he still in the village? She searched everywhere, asking anyone she met, but Chike was nowhere to be found. It was as if he had vanished. No one knew where he was, and it felt like the world was closing in on her. With a heavy heart and tears in her eyes, Amara returned home. She had to tell her father what had happened. But when she entered the house, she saw him sitting there, fuming with rage. "Where have you been, Amara?" her father demanded. "I told you never to leave this house again. Where is Chike? Did you go looking for that city boy again?" Amara stood frozen, unable to find the right words. She couldn't lie to her father, but she couldn't tell him the truth either. "Papa, I didn't find him. I couldn't find Chike anywhere," she said softly. Her father's face turned even redder with anger. "I don't want to hear any more about that man. You will never see him again. Do you understand?" "Never." Amara nodded sadly, knowing there was nothing more she could say. She felt like her heart was being torn in two, but she couldn't fight her father. Not now, not ever. Weeks turned into months, and months turned into years. Amara had almost forgotten what it felt like to be happy. She went through the motions of life, always thinking about Chike, but never hearing from him. She tried to move on, but his absence was like a deep wound in her heart that never healed. Then, one fateful day, everything changed. Amara's father was out in the farm, working as usual, but things took a dangerous turn. A group of ruthless gangsters from a nearby village attacked him. They were young and strong, and Amara's father, being an old man, couldn't fight back. He was overpowered and helpless. Just when it seemed like things were at their worst, something amazing happened. A group of young men appeared from nowhere, charging at the gangsters and beating them into submission. They were so fast and strong, and within minutes, the gangsters were on the ground, unable to fight back. Amara's father, still shaking from the attack, was helped up by the young men. One of them, a tall, strong man, took charge. He grabbed Amara's father and carried him in his arms like he was weightless. "Don't worry, old man. We'll get you to the hospital," he said with a calm voice. Amara's father, confused and in pain, didn't know who these strangers were, but he was too weak to resist. They took him to the hospital, and the young man stayed by his side, helping him every step of the way. When Amara heard the news from her friends that her father had been attacked and was in the hospital, she immediately rushed there with her mother. Her heart was pounding in her chest, praying that her father was okay. When they arrived at the hospital, Amara's eyes searched the room for her father. She was relieved to see him sitting up in bed, looking exhausted but alive. But then, her eyes shifted to the young man who had helped him. He was standing near the door, his back facing her. Amara's heart stopped for a moment, and she froze. She knew that back, that posture, the way he stood. As the young man turned around to leave, Amara's breath caught in her throat. It was Chike. Her heart leaped in her chest. She couldn't believe her eyes. After all this time, after all the years of silence, he was standing right there in front of her. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she couldn't hold them back any longer. She rushed to him, her heart pounding with joy and confusion. "Chike, it's you? It's really you," she cried. Chike turned around, his face lighting up with surprise and recognition. "Amara," he whispered, his voice full of emotion. "I never thought I'd see you again." They stood there for a moment, looking at each other, too stunned to speak. Amara couldn't believe it. After all the pain, all the time they had spent apart, here they were, together again. Her heart soared with happiness, but at the same time, it was filled with so many questions. Where had he been? Why had he stayed away for so long? But for now, all that mattered was that Chike was here. And Amara knew that no matter what happened next, they had found their way back to each other. Chike looked into Amara's eyes as he slowly explained what had happened. "Amara, after that day your father beat me up, I was left bruised and hurt. But my friends helped me get back on my feet. I had to travel to the city for better treatment. And while I was there, I found out that the work I was doing before I came to the village promised me a contract to go abroad. They said it would be a big deal and earn me good money after I recovered. That's why I stayed in the city for 2 years, he told her. Amara listened carefully, hanging on to every word. Chike continued, I traveled out of the country for a few years, working hard and building my future. But when I came back, I knew I had to come to the village and prove myself to your parents. I couldn't leave without showing them that I am worthy of you, Amara. Amara's heart raced. She could hardly believe what she was hearing. Chike paused for a moment, looking down, and then his voice softened. On my way here, I saw some bad guys beating up your father. I knew I had to step in, so I helped him. That's why I'm here today, standing before you, Amara. Tears filled Amara's eyes as she looked at Chike, overwhelmed with emotion. He had been through so much, and here he was, standing before her after all these years, willing to do anything for her. Days passed, and Amara's father gradually recovered from the attack. He had heard the whole story, how Chike had come to his rescue, how he had saved him from the gangsters who had attacked him. When he heard how Chike had helped him despite all that had happened before, his heart softened. One day, Amara's father called Chike to his side, his voice sincere. Chike, I've heard everything. I want to thank you for saving my life. I was wrong about you, and I want to ask for your forgiveness. Chike smiled warmly. I forgave you a long time ago, sir. We all have our mistakes. What matters is what we do after. Amara's father nodded in appreciation, clearly grateful for Chike's kindness. I am proud of you, Chike, and I will now support you both in your journey together. That evening, Amara's parents invited her family and friends to their house to celebrate the union of Amara and Chike. The house was filled with joy and laughter as everyone gathered to witness the beautiful moment. Amara's parents stood before them and prayed. May your love grow stronger every day, and may you both live forever happy, with hearts that beat as one, they said, offering their blessings. Chike held Amara's hand, and she looked at him with a smile that could light up the room. They both knew that their love had endured so much, but it was stronger now than ever before. They were ready to face the future together, hand in hand. Everyone cheered and celebrated as the happy couple, surrounded by friends and family, began a new chapter of their life, one filled with love, hope, and the promise of a bright future. And so, Amara and Chike's love story became one that the village would talk about for years to come, a tale of forgiveness, perseverance, and the power of love to overcome any obstacle. And so, Amara and Chike's love story became one that the village would talk about for years to come, a tale of forgiveness, perseverance, and the power of love to overcome any obstacle. They proved that no matter how hard the road may seem, true love can withstand trials, and forgiveness is the key to healing broken hearts. But the greatest lesson of all is that love does not look at appearances, age, or status. It is about understanding, patience, and believing in each other when the world tells you it's impossible. Amara and Chike showed us that when you have love in your heart, there is nothing you cannot overcome. So, what do you think of Amara and Chike's story? Did their love inspire you? Or did it teach you a lesson about forgiveness and second chances? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop your comments below and share your reactions with us. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video, comment, and subscribe to Tales by Foxy for more incredible stories that touch the heart. And hey, share this video with your friends and family, because we all need a little love and inspiration in our lives. Let's spread the message of hope, love, and forgiveness everywhere. Show some love. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a new story, and stay tuned for more amazing tales right here on Tales by Foxy. Until next time, stay loving, stay kind, and remember, true love always finds a way.